and welcome back to my channel. On this episode of Deep Dive, the Capitol Riot, we are going to talk about the big lie, the politicians that perpetuated it, how they perpetuated it, and how they turned it into an insurrection. So let's start with months before the election, all the way back to June. When Donald Trump saw that he was losing in the polls, he decided to latch on to this thing where mail-in voting, where he knew because he was told by political operatives, knew that they leaned heavily Democratic. That mail-in voting in the middle of a pandemic would likely cost him the election. That would lead heavily Democratic. More people would be able to vote, and they wouldn't want to. He even said that if you allowed mail-in voting, no Republican would win the presidency again, because he knew, like the rest of us who follow politics, that the Republicans are actually deeply unpopular. They don't have policies, they just have identity politics and suppressing of votes to get what they want. So he knew, and he started perpetuating that lie back in June. And he continued to repeat this lie over and over and over again. And as the election got closer, Republicans made every effort they could to stop mail-in voting. And when that didn't work, they tried another plan. And the plan was, in several states, to not allow them to count mail-in ballots until after the polls closed. So all the mail-in ballots that came in were not counted until after the polls closed. And in most cases where you saw that, they were counted secondary, meaning that the in-person votes were counted first, and then the mail-in votes were counted second. It led to something called the red mirage. In other states where mail-in voting was counted first, and then Republican in-person voting was counted second, you actually had a blue mirage, because I was watching it live that night, and I was aware of both ways. We actually had Texas and Florida in the beginning, because the mail-in ballots were counted first, which again led heavily Democratic, and then as they started counting the in-person votes, it went Republican. Do we cry fraud in those two states? No, because we knew about the blue mirage, because we paid attention. The same thing happened on the opposite scale with the red mirage, where people thought that Trump had it when he went to bed, or when they went to bed and then woke up to mail-in ballots being counted. It was simply because they had been counted, which is what you're supposed to do in an election. Ballots that are sent in on time and that are legal are supposed to be counted. And we knew the red mirage was coming. Many of us spoke about it months, weeks, and days leading up to the election. So, boom. That night, when Donald Trump realized he was losing, he came out in the middle of the night and said that he declared himself the winner. While Biden was staying silent, he declared himself the winner, even though he knew he had already lost. We all knew. I went to bed at like 4 o'clock in the morning knowing that Biden had it. I didn't celebrate until it was officially announced, but I knew that Biden had it because I was able to see where the votes were coming from, what counties and how many votes were left, and I knew that Donald Trump had no way to pull the extra votes that he needed to pull ahead. We knew. Those of us who pay attention knew. That's when other politicians started coming out and latching onto this because they are sycophants of Donald Trump's. And they want to placate to his base. You had Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, two of the biggest offenders, going on to national television and perpetuating the big lie. You also had Matt Gaetz. You had Josh Hawley. You had, who was the other big one that I saw all the time? I can't think of the other one. For some reason, I cannot think of the other one. But they got on television and they kept saying it over and over and over again. And for people who don't do their research and go off of cue boards and do other really ridiculous things, they see these things on Fox News, they see these things on ONN, and they don't have a basis to challenge it in the real world because they don't listen to anyone else. So they're just listening to these politicians, and these politicians are hyping it up and being like, Donald Trump definitely won, all the mail-in ballots were fake. They knew they weren't. They knew that there was no chance they were going to overturn it in the courts. Anyone who has any sort of political knowledge, and I'm telling you, Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz in particular, are not stupid. They knew there was no way this election was going to be overturned. But one of them, minimum, has a 2020 ambition, or 2024 ambition. I'm not entirely sure if Lindsey Graham does, but we both anyone who's watching this, me and you, we know Ted Cruz would like to run. And he needs Trump's base. Lindsey Graham is, I don't really get Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham latches onto the biggest bully on the playground and holds on for dear life. I will never understand that. But they knew. And then you had Donald Trump constantly, and I do mean constantly, tweeting out lies and falsehoods about how he won the election, how he's being cheated, how it's so unfair. And he had actually started this lie back in 2016 because his ego couldn't handle it. He lost the popular vote, and that he is deeply unpopular, which is a fact. He is extremely deeply unpopular. And he kept tweeting, and they kept saying, and other Republicans stayed silent. Like Mitch McConnell said, what harm could it do to allow Donald Trump to play it out in the courts, to tweet like this, to rage, to do all these things? It's not going to hurt anything. Mitch McConnell said this behind the scenes. It's not going to hurt anything. Well, guess what, Mitch McConnell? It ended up getting the Capitol attacked. So yes, it caused harm. You allowing this man baby to have his way and being too cowardly to stand up to him is why we had an insurrection on January 6th. They then continued, and they decided that, knowing full well on January 6th that even though they contested, because it happens a lot, believe it or not, that whole contesting happens a lot, that when they contested, it wasn't going to do anything, but yet they hyped it up and they made it seem like they could win. They made it seem like if they could just get it to Congress or to the Supreme Court, they could win. And Ted Cruz signed on to the lawsuit from Texas to the Supreme Court and even offered to be the lawyer, knowing full well, he's not stupid, guys, he's not stupid, knowing full well that it wasn't going to go anywhere in the Supreme Court. The man is not stupid. He's a lot of things, but he's not stupid. And he used that to rile up the base in hopes for his 2024 run. On that day, as Donald Trump was sitting there gleefully watching, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, and how many Republicans in the House? Almost all of them, decided that they were going to vote to overturn a fair and free election, which piped it up. Not only did that pipe it up, but Donald Trump saying that the vice president could overturn the election and throw out states that he simply didn't like. It's actually not true and is unconstitutional. He had a very ceremonial role. Mike Pence's job was ceremonial at best. He couldn't throw out votes, but yet Trump was still tweeting this out the day of and while the insurrection was actually happening. Because they know that they can lie. They know that they can basically say whatever they want. And their base is just going to flat out believe them without doing any research into the Constitution, without doing any research into the process of what happens that day. I cannot tell you how many times I had to explain to people that you needed a majority in both the House and the Senate to overturn the election, and there was no way that you were going to get a majority within the House. They didn't even get a majority within the Senate to overturn the election because it was simply not a thing. There was no fraud. But yet they went on national television repeatedly on OAN and Fox News and perpetuated this lie that simply wasn't true. And again, the two biggest offenders were Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham. There is video after video of them out there on Fox News saying that that they think that ballots came in, that the election was fraudulent, that Donald Trump actually won. They have the blood of the 5 people that died that day on their hands. That's strictly on them, and they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were lying. They knew 100% that there was no way to legally overturn this election. It was never about overturning the election. For Donald Trump, maybe, yeah, kind of. But for Lindsey Graham and Josh Hawley and Donald Trump, or not Donald Trump, what I'm saying, I cannot talk tonight. Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, the moron Republicans in the House that still can't say that Biden is president. It is all about placating a base that doesn't understand how politics works, that doesn't understand how the process works, that didn't look into the red and blue mirage that were talked about months and weeks before the election, because they don't watch major news. They take Trump's Twitter as fact, even when it would clearly state that these claims are not true. To them it was just a running joke, but it's not. Those tweets, those news appearances, the constant trying to rally up a base that doesn't understand politics is how we ended up with people that cannot understand how Donald Trump lost, and then took that anger and took it to the Capitol, because they honestly and genuinely don't understand how it works, and they are confused. It's incredibly frustrating, and I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of hate in the comment section for saying that, but it's true. The Capitol 6th riot was brought on by people not understanding how votes are counted, the laws that led up to the red mirage, and then they listened to politicians who wanted nothing more than to advance their own political career. All right, guys, I will see you later.